All right. Hi, this is EWhitefield, and this is my final project. Then we're going to go ahead and do the walkthrough. I might as well just get right to it because what we're looking at tonight is going to take quite a bit of time. So let's just go through it step by step, and we'll see how we go. All right, so the first thing on the list is to create a Linux VM in the cloud on the Google Cloud platform and use a small machine type. And anyway, we'll go through that. But we wanted to see what the commands were to do such a thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our VM instances, and then we're going to go to create an instance. And you're going to give this a name. Now, we had said that we were going to call this final project, and then last name. The next thing you want to do is you want to choose the least expensive region. For right now, that seems to be Central Iowa. And I didn't notice a difference between using any of these differences here, but you could select A, F, B, whatever you want. I don't see that it changes the cost over here, just as long as we're in Central Iowa. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here to the machine type, and we are going to pick a small, not the micro, but the small, because again, in the directions it says to do it as a 2 GB memory machine. So that's the E2 small. We do that, it cuts the cost down by half. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we deploy it with a container. The container image that we're going to be using is mcsoft.com/msql/server:2019 latest. Go ahead and click on select. And we see that gives us the Microsoft SQL Server. Next thing we're going to do is come down to the boot disk, and we're going to change this from a balanced persistent disk to a standard persistent disk, and we'll leave it at 10 gigabytes. That should significantly drop our cost estimate. And then the last thing that I did, because again it dropped it somewhat significantly, is I did go down here to the management group and came down to availability policy and the preemptibility, and turned that off, which reduced me to $4.07. Once I did all that, I clicked on create. Now I'm not going to do that here since I've already created the instance, but you can see when I go back to my instance here, you can see that I did create one. Now this one had to be number 2 because when I created the first one, I accidentally deleted it, and well, you have to wait before you can put another one in. So I just went ahead and put that one in, and you can see we have an IP address, and if you click on here, you can see that I actually did set it up according to the parameters. We're in the Central 1 area. You can see that I'm using a small profile, and you can see that I have set it up with a container. So everything is ready to go and good to go. So the next thing that I did is I went into the Cloud shell. Actually, no, I logged into the SSH shell. And logged into the project. And to create the Docker container that we wanted, the instance of MS SQL Server, is I ran this Docker command, docker run e, except you can see how it all lays out here, and created this particular SQL container. Now the one thing that was interesting is I did have trouble earlier. I did have to change the password, although I'm noticing that not everybody in the class had to do that. But that did, I won't run it again since I've already created the instance, but you can see that would be the correct way to go. And then to verify that I had the container up and running, I ran the docker ps command to see what processes are currently running. And you can see that there are 2 of them. It should come up with the same 2 I don't know why it's taking so long. But you can see that it comes up with a default one, which is this KLT one that we mentioned that we didn't want to use. And then we have the Pensive Jones one, which is the current virtual machine SQL Server machine that I'm running. So the reason why we want to use Docker, or using Docker is a good idea, is by creating these containers and creating images specifically, you can create an image that shows exactly what you want your virtual machine to look like. In this case, a Docker image. And it tells us that we want it to look like a certain thing. We want it to include a certain set of software like the Microsoft Server, SQL Server software. And it allows us to create that image so that we can then come along and recreate that same container over and over again quickly and easily. Another thing is containers allow us to move things around relatively quickly. You can copy from one place to another. And one of the things that is really good about it is that it allows you to make a copy of an existing container, to make your modifications, like say you want to update an app, to make your modifications in the new container, leaving the old container alone so that it sits there and it does its job. And then only when the new version is up and running and ready to go, do you switch over to the new container. And it allows you to keep things, compartmentalized. Let's say that the new app fails. You don't have a situation where you can't go back to the old app because you overwrote it. You simply just shut down the container that isn't working and then spin the old container back up. Less downtime, higher availability. It makes for a better experience for the end user. So that's why we would use Docker. All right, for the second thing, we needed to move our Docker, our database over to Docker. So to do that, what I did is, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to move the backup to the new virtual machine. So to do that, I simply clicked on the Upload File button. I went to Choose Files. I looked for the Pokemon database backup, which is in my SQL Server backup file, and I uploaded the file. Now you can see that I did this because if I go and do an ls command, you can see there's the file that I uploaded earlier to this directory. Now that I have that there, all I needed to do was to run the copy command, which looks like this. I'll copy this over here. And this allowed me to take and copy the backup file into the home directory. So the reason that this is important is that allows me now to come back here to the SQL Server Management Studio. And now I can just log in to the virtual machine that I created, which you can see we did that by using this IP address and the port that I had selected, which was 49,433. It allows me to log in here, and then I can come to databases. I can go to Restore Database. And since I copied that file over to home, I can now come over here to Device, File. I can add this file to it. I scroll up to the home directory, and there's my Pokemon backup. I can click on that, click on OK. And then the only thing I really need to do is to come here to Files and make sure that it's going to copy it into the right data, data path, which in this case is the virtual machine. And I can script that by using this script, or I could just come over here and I can click on OK, which would then restore the database, which you can see I've already done here in this virtual machine. So there's my Pokemon final. It has all of my tables from the other database right there. All right, so that's how you do the copy over. Now, as far as creating two schema, there were schema that we needed to create. So I came down here. I'm just going to close this for a second. I scrolled down to security under the Pokemon Final database in the virtual machine. And I came down here to schema, and you can see that I created one called professors and one called trainers. So Pokemon professors and trainers. The way that I did that was fairly easy. Did I miss any? Hold on, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything in 2. Okay, I did not. Good. So the way that I created the schema is I came over here and I right-clicked on New Schema. I typed in my schema name. So in this case, it was professors. And I just clicked on OK. I could also have done that by coming over here and let's see, the one I want. Is by doing that. I could simply just say create schema professors, create schema trainers. I could do it all in one command, and when I'm done, I have the professors and the trainers schema, which is hugely important because that allows us to determine, based on the roles or based on access rights, who gets to access what data. We can limit a person to accessing only the professor's schemas, which means that when you look at the tables, we can move those tables that we want to protect from the standard database into a specific professors only database or trainers only, which means that somebody who has this professors or this trainers schema as their access, they can only access those things we've given them access to, and they can't access any other tables or data that we don't feel that is necessary for them to have access to. And you can see that because I created a test user, and that test user was created under the professor schema. And you can see that when I ran the tables, and I'll just refresh it just to make sure that you can see that it's still active. Instead of having access to all of the tables that we had before, they only have access to select from the professors and the professor's tables, the 2 tables that I had moved under the professor's schema. Again, it's just a way of protecting information so that we can make sure that only those people who need it have access to it. Okay, now the way that we did that, let's see, I think it's this one right here. Again, I could go through and I could do a grant on the individual, or I can simply just say, I know I want all of the people on the schema professors. I want that to go to all of that select for that schema to go to the final test user. So this was just a much quicker, easier way to do it. Although I can go down to schemas. Let me go back to the system administrator. I can go to professors and I can right click on it. I can go to properties. And I can come here to permissions. I can search for specific users. I can browse for them, and I can select who I want to have access to that particular schema. So very easy to do. Honestly, I find this to be a little bit easier than actually using the point and click method, but that's just me. All right, so the next thing that we needed to do is to transfer some tables into our schema, which you can see that we did that. I transferred over the 2 to the professors and 2 to the trainers. And the reason, again, that I did this is to show that by limiting what a user can see based on their login, if I come back to test user, again, we can see that by limiting them to just the professor schema, they don't see any other tables other than what I want them to see.